Hi, welcome back. Thanks for joining us here, Car Design Dialogues Europe. With me, Christopher Ludwig. Such a pleasure to have you here. Over the past few years, we certainly noted quite a trend of reviving and reinventing iconic cars as new concepts and production models, especially SUVs and trucks, whether the Ford Bronco, the Hummer, Jeep Wagoneer, or the highly successful Land Rover Defender. But there was another concept revival in 2020 that might not have been as familiar as those nameplates to our audiences in Europe or North America, but which certainly would have struck a chord for some billion people in India and South Asia. The Tata Sierra came out in India in the early 1990s at a time of major economic and cultural transformation in the country, and so it is fitting to see this well-resolved design reinvented as an electric vehicle at another time of incredible change and transformation in the country. Today, it's my pleasure to present a design review of this fascinating project. We're going to hear from Tata's VP of Global Design, Pratap Bose, and mostly from the team at Tata's design studio based here in Coventry, here in the UK, led by Martin Ulrich. The design studio which spearheaded the project. It's a really fascinating take on an Indian classic with a modern twist from a major design center here in Europe, sharing a vision for global automotive design. We're going to cut now inside the studio at Coventry, and then Pratap and Martin will join me here afterwards for live Q&A, so keep your questions and comments coming. See you then.
When the original Sierra was launched in the mid-90s, early and mid-90s in India, India was a very different place and country to what it is today. And I think, the Sierra, when it dropped, was really something from outer space. It was so revolutionary. And, it was truly the first, let's say, lifestyle SUV. There was nothing before that, and I think very few products even after that have come close to what the Sierra was, and what it then sort of stood for. So yeah, the Sierra is that sort of incredible product with heritage, set a legacy, and it's one of those one of those names that we have in our portfolio that we are really lucky to have, actually. When you redesign something iconic, you got to sort of bring it in a way that reflects the spirit of the original product, but more than that, the original thought behind the product. So when we briefed the team here in the UK studio, it was actually to get them in the frame of mind of the people who created this product in the 90s. So Sumant Mulgaonkar, Mr. Tata himself, Ratan Tata had a lot to do with a product like this. So when we wanted to bring it back, you had to pay sort of homage to the people and their thought process. What would they have done? And that's why, the new Sierra or the Sierra concept that you see here is on an electric architecture. Because I think that's what they would have done. The original creators wouldn't have put a IC engine in this car, so that's why we went down the electric route. It really establishes what EVs can do as you go forward. It can entirely become a lifestyle product. It can take you to places which your imagination is the limit, and I think EVs already are starting to do that. So yeah, one is it should be EV. Two, it should recreate the thinking behind the original. And the third is, of course, as soon as anyone sees it in this new era, it should be instantly recognizable. And even if someone wasn't born or wasn't exposed to the original Sierra, this should still be a fantastic product. I think that's very important. So don't be a slave to to the original or to the past, respect it, but move the game on. I think that's where the brief comes. We have some legendary nameplates in our portfolio, and we were already bringing in the Safari. As you know, we just launched that earlier this month, and yeah, this was the second one we had on our target to bring it back, because I think the time is right. The time for a product like this is right. And there's no better place to look for nameplates than your own sort of portfolio. And we found that the nameplate, the product philosophy, and what we wanted this new one to be, to really set this language for electric car design, for EVs within Tata Motors going forward. This nameplate was just perfect to bring back.
Here we are, 12 months, a year almost to the date since we were in Delhi with this Sierra show car. I wanted to ask, when you and the team were designing it, how much did the original car actually influence the design?
Yeah, when we started the project, it was all about how a new Sierra could look like. And so, of course, the first thing is the typical side view where you're talking about, the graphic of from the B pillar, the C pillar with this huge window glass, etc. So I think we started from that. I would say we start with a quite similar kind of identity in the Y0, and then we start exploring in different direction, and then step by step we came back to what is the final car, basically. And as we always say, it's really difficult to kind of achieve a good proportion with this huge glass, because in all this latest car design, each designer is trying to keep everything as tight as possible, very high belt line, very low roof, etc., to make it look really dynamic. That was a huge challenge, because at the end you have a big, massive window. But this is about the story, and this is about how you can perceive from inside the outside and the outside to the inside. So this is the whole point of it.
Yeah, the original Sierra was designed in the late 80s, and that era of car design was very, I would say, almost modernist, very architectural. So it's just a lot of horizontal, vertical lines. Yeah. There's not a lot of sort of flamboyant movement. And there's a kind of timelessness, but there's also this sort of form follows function where, like you said, the glass DLO actually is quite tall, just to make sure that the passengers can see outside. And that's a big part of the story of this car, sitting inside. Another main sort of theme of this car is it's an EV. It's a born EV. But at the same time, there's a number of car design around nowadays that's trying to communicate what EV is. Yeah. So it's trying to find the balance between saying it's an electric vehicle, but at the same time it doesn't have to be kind of in your face anymore, because it's becoming mainstream in many ways.
Absolutely. You can see plenty of examples, especially now, I would say in the last 3-4 months, of brands who are using the EV to create their own identity. At the time, especially for an Indian brand, was really, really difficult, because we established our DNA about 5-6 years back with the Humanity line. So based on that, we create our brand identity, our design philosophy, and all of that. So, but that was a bit of not making really sense to have a huge, deep grille in black without any function. So that's where we get to the point of decided, so what shall we do with that? Is it just an aesthetic feature, the Humanity line, which is the front upper grille, or is it we can do something more with that? And then the story came about this kind of charging point, and the Humanity line was becoming just a line, and inside of that we have this white shield, which is a functional part of it. At the beginning, I remember walking around the clay, put some tapes, and it was always quite difficult, because we've never done that before. It was looking a bit strange. But then with this upper fascia, which was very horizontal, very, again, 80s, as you said, but also very architectural.
When you guys were designing this car, how much did you get influenced by the original car and the original design, and how much were you trying to create actually a new kind of vocabulary or creating something contemporary?
I think the most exciting thing about this design project was that the original car was a real kind of iconic vehicle in India. I think it was loved by a lot of people in India. And I feel that the time was kind of right to try to bring back this kind of spirit of the original car. But when we look at the original car, it's quite a simple design. And I think what we wanted to try and achieve was to bring this very, very sort of modern electric, sophisticated kind of design language, and just try and capture the spirit or the essence of the original car. So, for example, the original car was a very tough, rugged SUV, based originally on a kind of pickup truck. And so we tried to capture the strength and solidity and durability of an SUV. But we've done it in a very sort of modern, kind of clean way. I think what we've tried to do is create a very, very strong graphic around the car. So for example, you can see these very, very strong graphical lines that connect the elements of the design. And these are sort of connected with sophisticated sort of positive, negative surfaces to give a very sort of solid presence and power to the car without it looking like an old car. This is very much a sort of futuristic kind of interpretation. One of the elements of the design which we really liked, I think, about the old car was the sense of space. So the upper cabin is sort of very glassy. It has a huge sort of rear area for the occupants. And that was the kind of main part of the design that we tried to, if you like, capture and move forward. So again, we've sort of done it in a sort of very unique way. We've sort of got rid of one of the cant rails and the pillars on the rear. So we have this very, very large open glass area. And I feel that's kind of gives that sense of openness, playfulness, and a kind of excitement for the customer in India, that they could kind of go anywhere and see something new in their vehicle.
I remember one of the key sketches when we were developing it. You did one where you had this sandwiching effect on your sketch, where you had tough tech and flush tech.
Yeah.
Because that became almost the philosophy of this design.
I think following on from what Rich was saying as well is like, you know, there's a real sense of duality with this car. In every sense, there's duality physically with the asymmetric layout. You know, we've got this very tough lower section and very human and approachable front and upper section. And at the start of the project, we were looking at pictures of the original car and that sort of very strong breakup. And I guess it was the thinking of how can we take this for a ride and explore the idea of what electric cars are for us going forward. And if you look at a lot of modern electric equipment now, we have some really interesting ways that the construction of cars and products are made, where you have a base level where it's super tough, super strong, even waterproof, because if you're going to have batteries and stuff in there, and that kind of becomes tough tech. And when we look at the original pictures of the old car, it had that waterline, you know, of the black, and so it's created again here in a more dynamic, modern way, splits that lower tough tech section, and then on the top where we approach and where we touch, it's flush tech. And if you compare that to modern equipment, phones, screens, we have our slide to open, touch screens, we have an exercise in reduction and minimalism, which is, for us, I think, very, very much the future of where we can go with that sort of thing.
Cool.
Yeah, a bit of story everywhere in this car. I thought at the beginning that should be a good combination of product design, but not completely product design in a way of being losing completely the dynamism, because that is not the Sierra. The Sierra was quite of a dynamic car for the time.
And it's still an automotive vehicle. I mean, the customers that we're appealing to are modern young customers who are looking at it from a product and obviously, you know, features and experience point of view. But then you have, you know, our generation in India who experienced it as children and have that nostalgia and have that sort of, you know, connection, emotional connection with it as a brand and as a product. So it's finding that balance, making it modern, but at the same time not retro. I remember about 5 minutes after we unveiled the car in Delhi, and one of the largest dealers came up to us, and he was so emotional, and he was saying, like, I was a child sitting in the back row of my parents' car, you know, 25, 30 years ago, and he couldn't believe that now he had the opportunity to potentially, you know, sell this nameplate again.
Yeah,
the reaction was really, really profound.
So Ori, we're sitting here in the Sierra 12 months, a year almost to the date since we launched the car in Delhi in 2020, and you know, with COVID and a number of things, you know, this car has become even more, I would say, almost relevant theme-wise. if you look at the story behind it. So one of the things I was going to sort of say is, when we were designing it, the first thing, it was almost like a family first brief.
Yeah.
So do you remember, like, when we started it, like what we wanted to achieve with this?
Well, it goes back to the memories, that Pratap kind of related to us, with the original Sierra. We wanted to really get that feeling that when you're in the back of the car, it's actually very roomy. But in the same token, we wanted the car to really be that, detox space, very serene, environment that, everybody wants to be in. And almost it's almost your capsule, your safe capsule inside, the environment. So it was really interesting to look at that. And now with, like you said, a year after, it still feels quite relevant to us. Obviously, you may not be, close enough with the self-distancing measures, etc. But it's actually quite still a relevant space. You could see how you would use it in today's context. It's still very, home-like. So working from home and being on lockdowns for most of the planet, it's actually quite interesting to see, how you could, potentially work, with your laptop on your knees, or even, just spending some time going places. I think it's still very relevant, even though, it was a year old.
The use of the moss. What was the story behind that?
So that was very interesting. We basically, as part of the branding exercise we're doing obviously on the brand within, the products, but also the displays we're doing, with the touch points for the customers. We've got really the three pillars, where it's the warm materials, the nature brought in one way or the other inside the space, and also, the authenticity of the materials. Basically, if in the last few years, in Geneva, but also in Delhi, when we go to motor shows, and again, that's on the world before COVID, so that will be interesting to see how everything goes. But we had those designs on the stands, where we had the plants, the green vertical gardens.
Yes.
And basically, what we tried at the beginning, we wanted to almost have some,
like hanging gardens,
exactly. Again, in the whole example of emulating the house, feelings, what you could have in your kitchen, in your conservatory or whatever. And the idea was to do that. And then eventually we came across the idea of what if it's actually filtering, and very much like a forest does for the planet. We were trying to say, can we do something like that? And by researching a little bit, we came across that moss that is actually natural, product that's essentially got some treatment where it's actually keeping it live, and it's actually still filtering, the air. I mean, obviously it's not, a major filtering system, but it's still, incremental, better air in the cabin. And we felt that, it was really fitting quite nicely with the sustainable, story in the car, as well as the overall, picture of what Sierra is all about. Again, it's a big space. You potentially have 4, 5 people in there, and the idea was to try to help a little bit, on the extra.
One of the things we've been hearing now is, in a COVID sort of culture and post-COVID, there's been a lot of sort of nostalgia, remembering the past and all that. And it's funny that when we launched this car, a lot of the people who really had a positive reaction to this were the ones who were sitting where I am now, where they were the kids in the 80s and the 90s, and now they're the customer. So this was the sort of the way they saw the world was, from this back seat.
You mean the world before
COVID? The world before COVID.
So, things we can't do anymore. But yeah, you're right. It's playing on all the key elements that the original Sierra was displaying, but also trying to have that modern twist to it, trying to be also somewhat of a I talked about it, but the detox, but more on a digital way, where, for example, on the IP we don't have that race to the having the biggest screen you can get every time. This is more like trying to see the outside, having the panoramic glass. It's very much trying to be a detox, but also an interactive space where you see outside, inside, and also being at home, but on the way. So it was really that dual thinking behind the car, and I think it echoes very well the fact that the kids then are now the drivers of that car, or the buyers of that car potentially. It's very much playing on the nostalgia. Yeah,
I think that what you said about the screens, I think that was one of the things that most had a reaction from designers and people who saw the car was, where are the screens? And it was actually a real effort and a kind of argument to almost take the screens out and force people to have the dialogue. I mean, you can put the screen on that tech shelf, but I think it was a really very strong message.
Well, we all carry our phones, we're always connected. I wouldn't say it's easy because nobody's got the right answer, but we've got, some brands like, for example, Tesla, who has brought, a very, functioning big screen in the car. They were very, a USP at the time, but there's two ways to look at it. It's either you're connected anyway and you assume that you can interact with your car, or it's actually your phone goes away completely and then you interact with the screen in the car. So here we put essentially the accent on the interaction as, on the human side of things, and really playing with the so-called HMI, so human-machine interface, and really not trying to essentially just touch a flat screen. We played with materials. We've got the wood on the floor. We've got the moss and trying to have that filtering feature in the car. It was really trying to play with the senses, and trying to really echo, all the elements that you will remember.
Yeah, I think it's a really good example of now how a designer's job isn't just designing the product, which is maybe a kind of very old school way of approaching it, but it's actually designing the experience.
Yeah,
so it's almost, those two things have to happen simultaneously. So you have to consider how that person, the customer or the user will actually experience this space, in this case.
Well, the industry, I mean, we're all designers, different brands, etc. We all hoping to have the crystal ball and knowing where things will go. If you think of autonomy, I mean, we're clearly going in a way where at one point you will do more activities that you would actually do in your house or in a space where you don't have to worry about driving. So if we do something like that, this is the type of view that we have at the moment. It will eventually go a bit more, I'm sure, but the other way is obviously driving and being active with the car. This space here on that car was, like you said, more like a we type approach rather than a me. It's not so much of a driver's car. It's more like a bunch of friends or family, road trip on the weekend. And the idea here was really to focus on the conviviality of the space, and then the key attributes of what you would find in your living room, materials, the way the furniture also is inside the vehicle. It's very much like a language of a home rather than a vehicle.
I mean, this layout here, we have it as essentially a 4-seater, with this sort of L-shaped, lounge bench in the back, but with seat belts and everything. But when we did the packaging of it, I mean, we designed it as even a 7-seater. So, there is actually the sort of the room and the space to have this second row, which isn't here in this scenario. But even the ingress, egress, and everything, was done for that sort of, even approachable, layout.
And the spaciousness on such a, I mean, it's 4.2 meters long. The car is not long at all. And actually, the spaciousness you get in there feels really much like a much bigger car. And this is thanks to the panoramic glass. That's essentially a cue we've stolen from the original car. But it's actually very helping, the space and the it's your patio doors, on your house again, and bringing light in, and it's really helping the spaciousness of that car. Yeah.
It's been 1 year, Lady Martin, is the time just flew. Well, one thing we were sort of looking at is obviously the main theme of the car was digital detox well-being, and we're trying to understand how we can actually translate that into a CMF, colors and materials, basically. So one of the things that we were looking at quite intensely was obviously the color theme-wise is quite calm and sort of simple. But obviously we're trying to find a small sort of a tactile tactility, so sensorial experience through it. So that's still something that I quite like about up to these days, because obviously outside of this very simple minimalistic outside and inside, and then you can actually have a different layer of readings, and then you can touch it and then you can visually see it. And then it's, for me, it's almost like a second finding of what you see as a first impression. So Nadia, just thinking about it again now after 1 year, I'm just thinking how we started in the beginning. We start looking at this from a point that this was the first mobility concept from Tata, wasn't it? Do you remember all these conceptual ideas, trend ideas that you were sort of studying at the time, tried to come up with the themes for the CMF?
Yeah, so we obviously started off looking at making a trend report and then from there condensing it down to themes. So our 2 themes for Sierra was Sierra Self and Sierra Social. So Sierra Social was looking at shared mobility, and then Sierra Self was looking at kind of wellness, eco-friendly sustainability.
Now, what was your sort of favorite bit of the car? And then, you know, did you see that result as how you envisioned in the beginning?
I think for me, the favorite bit of the car is like the wood and the moss, because that's the first thing that you kind of like read and look at. And I think what's nice is the moss is this kind of conceptual idea of kind of a clean space. It was like Sierra was like this digital-free sanctuary that you could go in and feel kind of connected with nature, and having these raw materials like the wood and the moss of feeling like you're part of, consumed with nature around you.
Okay, Steve. One of the things we were talking about with Kyung-hee was the materials that were selected on this interior. And I think one of the real successes of this car, signature almost, is the wooden floor. How did that come about, and what was the sort of process behind?
We really wanted to get that sort of crafted feel, one that was probably looked a bit more sustainable than if you did like a full walnut, tub.
Yes.
But we wanted to make sure that we could really see the lines and the character of the vehicle as well, and to try and get that sort of topography around the interior, because the floor, generally speaking, through automotive design of past years, it's a place where you want to hide a multitude of sins almost.
Yes, that's a good word.
And now that we're going into like the electric age and we've got more space and we can do more things, like moving the seat, for instance, you wouldn't usually be able to do with the tunnel, etc. But now that we've got these sort of battery packs, it's so much nicer to see how that tub is crafted, and we really wanted to use that. So it brings your eye really around the vehicle, much like the rest of the seating and the sofa arrangement that we get as well. So it creates this kind of harmonious interior. I mean, the most interesting thing is that most people, when they use woods in vehicles, they use like the top surface to try and get that detail, and they use that kind of look of the wood already. You're not creating it yourself. But when we did it, we used the edge, which is, probably the weakest point, but we joined them together to create something super strong and reliable.
I was also going to mention the seats, the fabrics on the seats. I mean, the seat design in terms of form language is extremely simple, almost, again, going back to a almost furniture-inspired sort of aesthetic. But the material has a big part in it, in the sense that it's not this sort of traditional automotive, I would say, approach.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, the materials that we've used here are very much inspired by the sort of way that fashion and shoes, in particular, sneakers, trainers, are sort of moving forwards, especially within sort of the younger generation right now, who almost use them as a style point rather than an actual practical thing. You're using, myself included, wearing basketball boots, to work. It's that kind of craft and using those kind of materials. So instantly your consumer is already looking at these kind of materials. So why wouldn't you bring them into a different space which you want them to enjoy? They're already, it's kind of part of their language already. So you're already kind of working with them.
I mean, traditionally, when you do sort of interior design, the focus is on the instrument panel, center console, steering wheel, then doors.
Yeah.
And here, actually, I get the impression that the seats and the floor are almost the primary focal point, which is interesting because actually when you open the door, they are the main focal point when you see the interior space.
Exactly. It all comes back to the kind of the lines and how it draws your eye around the vehicle. Generally speaking, when you open the vehicle door of a contemporary, a normal vehicle, you would be, just looking at your driving sort of area.
Yes.
Whereas here you're truly looking at the whole car and the whole experience, which is really nice. And we really try to use lighter materials, including the wood floor, to really brighten that interior and to really draw your eye around it. There's nothing, we could have put crazy accents in here and really harsh colors. We could have been really dynamic and really forceful with the eye, but that's not what we wanted to do from a point of view of people's mental health as well. When they're looking into the vehicle, it needs to kind of calm them down.
So one of the themes that you mentioned, Kyung-hee, was the digital detox. I think in all the reviews for the car, this theme and its execution with design and the CMF material choices was really one of the highlights of this design.
Yeah. Definitely, Martin. I mean, that is sort of quite a big question nowadays, isn't it? I mean, it was getting quite big before COVID, and I think it's a lot more so now. I remember like a couple of years ago, there was a talk about Google software, and from the Milan Furniture Fair, there's mention about this people losing tactility by using too much screen time and stuff. So I think because of that, and then sort of so many other things, especially with the COVID and stuff, people lost touch of contact with the physical thing. So this detox and then sensorial stimulation is becoming more and more important. And then we kind of sort of incorporate that into the car interior as well. So you don't have to touch your screen, but there's so many different things you can feel and see. And hopefully, I mean, things like the beautiful grain on the floor and then different patterns in the material from the inside of the car can help you relax and then sort of shut yourself from the outside of busy world, especially Indian context that, the cities and urban environment is very busy.
The other thing was these leather straps, which are just accents, but they've got these sort of Easter egg also messages as well. And they're part of, I guess, the overall story.
I really love those the Easter egg features because obviously Sierra for Tata is a very special sort of name, isn't it? And then the Legend Reborn and all this sort of showing silhouettes of the old and new car.
Yes.
And it sort of brings sort of quite sentimental nostalgia. But obviously, we're not saying that we are staying in the past, but we are sort of moving forward in the future as well. So combination of the material and obviously just the sort of little details and stuff, that's one of my favorite part of the car, actually.
And then just going to the exterior design, how much was the original Sierra a part of the decision for the exterior color? But I think the DLO actually has a big part to play in terms of communicating it's a Sierra.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you can remember, Martin, we looked at quite a few different colors, didn't we? And I think, obviously, white's been one of the most popular color globally for the last many years. And I think it's even more so in Indian context, especially it's a very hot country. And obviously heat is something that people try to sort of avoid and shelter from as well. But obviously, we wanted to see what we can actually do with the white, rather than just having sort of plain white, what kind of a twist we can have on the white. So we sort of start playing with some of the sort of effect that we can add to it. So like many paint color, it looks solid from the distance, but obviously it's got sort of metallic mica sort of pigmentation, and then it's got very sort of subtle sort of a greenish blue sort of sheen on the highlight. So that helps sort of showing the shape as much as possible. And also that sort of that story goes into the interior as well, doesn't it? The interior IP. Again, this stage is very conceptual, but obviously there's a quite clear link from inside and out.
Yes.
And again, that's sort of a quite common theme that we come across nowadays in the modern design language. Inside is not just pure inside anymore. Outside.
Yes. I think this was one of the most successful projects that we've done in terms of kind of holistic design, where the exterior and the interior were very consistent. And just like the exterior design and the interior design teams, there was a real sort of aesthetic consistency. I felt like the CMF story very much complemented those designs, but also kind of wrapped it and made it a complete package.
Yeah, it's a harmony, I think. It's definitely one of the...
Yes, that's definitely the word.
absolutely stunning. It's always such a pleasure to get to hear from the team and get those stories behind the design. I want to bring Pratap and Martin now into the conversation. Pratap, Martin, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us here at Car Design Dialogues.
Thank you, Chris.
Hi, hello. Thank you for inviting us.
It's a pleasure, and thanks again to the whole team for sharing all that with us. We've already got some tremendous response. I can let you know that at least one of our colleagues wants to buy the car as soon as it's ready. So we'll get an order set for you as soon as the production model comes. We've got some great comments from the audience as well. I want to just start with a little bit more on the context of the original Sierra. In the context of, you mentioned this being a very aspirational vehicle. And I wondered, when you were designing the concept, were you envisioning this as equally aspirational and premium, if you like, given where you're reaching with the audience? Maybe I can ask you front.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, if you track what we've been doing in the last 4 or 5 years through design and through the products, our strapline in the company is actually connecting aspirations. And, that's what we are trying to elevate all our products to. And, like in the rest of the world, in India, a car purchase is still a very, very aspirational thing that a person does as a family. And we feel in whatever segments we are operating, be they small hatchbacks or, a car like this, it has to really connect with the customer's, deepest desires to own a vehicle. A private vehicle ownership is still a much desired thing. And with this product, we wanted to bring in, of course, EV technology. We'll talk about that as we go along. That itself is aspirational, and then package it in this really modern design, which touches on some of the classic, original Sierra themes.
Great. And it might be an obvious question, or maybe not. You have studios in India, Italy, UK. This is an Indian classic. You're bringing it back. You designed it out of the UK, out of the Coventry studio. So why bring it to the UK?
So there's a couple of reasons. One is the India studio was extremely busy, by the way, in putting some of our current products into the market. So we distribute work based on capacity and capability, and while all 3 studios are capable, we had some great capacity available in the UK. The other thing is the role of the UK design studio is also slightly more advanced design. It's more provocative. It brings questions to the rest of the company, and having a little bit of distance from the mothership in India was important, because we wanted to actually keep the project quite secret. And many of our colleagues, even in marketing and other departments, didn't know about this. Now, this is very important to me, Chris, because as a head of design, it's our duty to sometimes protect what we are doing from a lot of internal influence within the company. So we wanted to sort of keep it away from the spotlight, and then only present it at a point where we were ready to show it to the management. So I think being in the UK helped us achieve both of those things. This little slightly advanced approach that we needed, and also it kept us away from the spotlight. Martin?
Yeah, it was the same. It's a little bit of like a skunkworks project in the sense that we're doing a little bit of forecasting. This car wasn't in the cycle plan. It wasn't on the radar, but it's design's role to ask the questions and to make sort of provocative gestures. But it was an educated guess, in the sense that we really analyzed, the car's history, and we looked at the design, the potential of it, not just from a design execution point of view, but as a product offering point of view. That's really important.
And I think one more point I wanted to mention, when we showed this in 2020, so last February in Delhi, that was the 75th year of Tata Motors' existence. So I wanted to also tie in that story, that with the 75th year, you bring back a real legend.
I wonder, it must have also perhaps helped with what you mentioned, and not being a slave to the past, and perhaps taking some distance as well from the original. It's very touching, actually, how close the product was to so many in India, and so maybe having some distance from the team. But I'm sorry for that brief interruption, but I'm still here. I wondered though how you also did seem to want to lean into the nostalgia in some points, so not to totally swerve away from that. And I wondered, Martin, maybe you can talk a little bit about how you look to embrace the nostalgia to a certain extent in the design as well.
Well, I think the first thing we did was obviously the Sierra was an iconic name and an iconic brand in the history of the company. But we looked at what were the values of that? What did people associate with the Sierra? Not necessarily visually or aesthetically, but when they thought of that car, what did it remind them of in terms of an experience, and what did it mean to them emotionally? And so when we were designing it, obviously there's the DLO and there's a certain sort of I would say topography, architecture that we took inspiration from. But ultimately, for me, the car had to capture the sort of zeitgeist of what the original Sierra accomplished, in the Indian market. And so it's not just the visual of it, but how did you experience the car? And that then, the more we talked about it, the more we discussed it, it created the story about the interior, about large windows, about not having the screens, about experiencing something together as a family, and so forth. So there was the visual part, and then there was the sort of experience part. And I also have to say, the original Sierra, I think we mentioned it in the video, was a product, a design of a certain age, aesthetically. I always say it was a very modernist type of car. When you look at car design at that period, it's quite linear, quite architectural. And I thought that sort of timelessness, it's almost come full circle where modernism is now almost in vogue from a nostalgia point of view. But I actually think as a designer, there's a lot of merit to it from a timelessness point of view. So I thought, like, when we were designing it, sort of less is more philosophy was a very good approach.
Yeah.
I wanted to turn to an audience question here, a particular one from a coating supplier. So they're really interested in some aspects on the exterior. I'm interested to get your needs and ideas on the exterior material usage. How would you need this to be reflected to the outside surface of the car? So some question there.
Yeah, I think we spoke in the video about this tough tech and how the architecture, there's this real platform that the body sits on. It's got more than a graphic. It's more than a graphic split. It's actually more functional as well. And I think from a materials point of view, that's a very, very interesting story. Could we have something that was? I was very keen with Martin that we would treat that platform very differently to what we would otherwise do. So again, if there's any self-pigmented materials, recycling, because that doesn't have to be a super high gloss finish. We can get away with something much more rougher. So again, from a material story, I think that lower architecture or the lower platform is a very, very interesting area for us to study.
Yeah, and I think this flush tech duality is really interesting. And obviously, you mentioned the consumer electronic kind of influence, which is also an interesting duality with the digital detox to a sense. Well, what's important for you about this tough versus flush, and why the sort of reference to the consumer electronic side?
I mean, for me, it was a kind of natural. I mean, for the vehicle's an electric vehicle, so the sort of tough tech, is that layer of the foundation, the platform. It communicates that it's an electric vehicle, and there's a certain aesthetic that not only does it give protection to the vehicle from a cladding point of view, it also graphically reduces the height, but it like just communicates that it's an electric vehicle. But the flush tech for me again goes back to that very modernist. And if you look at consumer electronics, there's a big emphasis on PQ, where the technology is very user-friendly and very sort of approachable. So, we really made an emphasis that, the glass and the sort of the seals and everything like that is as seamless as possible. And that communicates a quality, but it also communicates, I would say, a sort of modern EV DNA to it.
Yeah.
One of the things that is getting the most responses on our chat here, and you mentioned in the video as being one of the obviously the big responses from media and others, is in fact the removal of screens or the minimalization, the digital detox area. Can you tell us a little bit more about the kind of internal debate side of that in terms of bringing a modern classic and then yet removing this quite ostentatiously?
I think, the original car, a lot of people had a very visceral connection to that car. It wasn't through screens, it wasn't through, So when you talk about human-machine interface, it was literally listening and hearing to the engine, and crunching the stones below you. And when we came for this to this modern interpretation, when we did a study, we found there's some sort of crazy arms race for the biggest screen that you can shoehorn into a car. You're edge to edge, coast to coast. It's in the back seats. It's everywhere. And we felt that actually modern high tech going forward is you having the choice of being able to control how much you want to see or not. And connectivity is also about being able to bring your device that you use seamlessly into a product like this, without going through menus and trying to pair it and whatever. You sit in the car, you pop in your phone, it becomes part of the car. So I think that's more high tech than a 36-inch screen. And and like I said, it resonated really with the philosophy of this car, that you look outside, you connect with each other, you connect with nature, rather than a device. So that was one of the approaches which was very close to Martin and myself. That we won't. It's easy to put a screen, whatever 40 inches across, but it's more challenging when you take that away and you strip it all back and you give the choice back to the customer. And I think that was important for us.
And the other thing was, again, thinking about the original car, it was a product that people experienced traveling together, seeing family together, going on a trip and so forth. And if you think about the children, at that time period when there weren't these sort of mobile devices and screens and so forth, the kids in the back, were staring out the window and watching the landscape go by, and then talking with their parents and arguing with each other. I mean, I experienced that as a child, in the back seat, and that's how I remember those trips. And we were thinking, like, actually, the family, that's how people now remember that period. They don't remember, staring into a screen and watching a movie or anything like that. So we thought, like, wouldn't it be interesting actually to bring that almost 360 back, where that sort of collective experience is about people together and not being actually separate, even though they're in the same car together.
Yeah.
With this sort of topography and nature inspiration, were you looking to draw on some specific inspiration in the Indian context as well? I mean, we tend to think about the urbanization and the growth of India from the city side, but obviously there is this unbelievable nature aspect here too. So, and I think you talked originally about the original Sierra being exactly an escape to that sort of potential. So how was that influencing you?
In our SUVs, we actually have a strapline which we brought back. It's called Reclaim Your Life. And I think, in this post-COVID era, it's even more relevant, because our lives have just been hijacked by, the laptop and the phone and the computer and all of, the Teams meetings and all of that. So Reclaim Your Life is actually a strapline from the mid-90s, in our own advertising. And this is exactly that sort of car. We can see that you want to now get away from this hyper digital world and go and experience, the countryside. And like you said, India is a huge country and very diverse. You have deserts, you have snow, you have all of this at the same time. In the same season, you can have all of this going on. So we feel that people will actually break away from the shackles of their sort of digital daily lives and go out and explore the world and explore India in this case. But wherever we go, I think it's going to be the same thing. With the advent of glamping, with much better infrastructure to actually get into or out of the city, we are seeing people doing huge amount of traveling in India now. Intercity traveling, which earlier used to be on a train or on a flight. We have people driving from Bombay to Delhi without thinking about it, and that's 1,000 miles, 1,100 miles. So, this is all happening because people want to get out and control their lives and be together.
I think that you mentioned that I have to remind myself this is largely pre-COVID when it was kind of being designed. I think what really resonated with me was the well-being focus, the sort of real emphasis on, and I hadn't seen as much of that, I think, in concepts before. And I thought, is this thought of pre-COVID? What inspired that? Was it the similar thing that you're talking about now, that sort of escape into nature? Or was it other aspects which you're drawing from the culture there?
I think, the car was designed pre-COVID. But having said that, a year on since it was launched and actually what we've all experienced, I find actually a lot of the themes even more relevant than ever. So whether that's just serendipity or if it's actually just a reality of how trends have developed, I don't think there was any sort of reaction to it.
Yeah, I mean, we do have, of course, one of our team members, Indra, he lives and works in London. He's based in London, and he is our trend watcher.
That's right.
And he saw well-being coming up as a theme,
yes.
and also Tata Motors and Tata Group has got a lot to do with people feeling and being better. In fact, our show stand in Delhi where we launched this car was all about well-being. So it was a theme for the entire show. And people like Indra who watch trends very closely, he kind of saw this coming. People eating better, people spending more time on self-awareness, people spending more time on health, and we saw the car as a inseparable part of that overall wellness theme.
Great. Fantastic. We have a couple of minutes left. I wanted to look ahead a little bit, and then there's some questions to this effect as well, in terms of progress and path towards potential production model. I'm sure that there's many in the market wondering about that. And then maybe related, we can just get a little bit of insight on some of where you think what can translate into production, because you've got a number of really notable features on here, whether it's that amazing DLO, whether it's the flush door handles, obviously the wood and the moss and things. And a lot of people are curious to see what might we see come down in the production version.
I would be lying if I didn't say like our objective is actually to put this car into production as is behind us. That is the ultimate objective of any designer, and I think it's fairly realistic. When it comes to like individual things like the wooden floor, I mean, when we were designing it, I kind of asked the designers, both interior and CMF, to question the status quo on everything. We all know that the flooring of most cars is this sort of plastic carpeting. And if you think about it from a practical point of view, when your kids come from outside, playing in a muddy field, you tell them to take off their shoes before they go on the carpet. And yet here we have every automotive product has that equation. And so it's like, I think, a designer should question everything. I'm not saying that wood is the answer. This was ultimately a concept and a show car. But as Stephen even said, a floor in an automobile product has a lot of kind of weird topography. It's almost like you vac form it over the package and the fittings and the seat, seals and all that. So if you have something which has a sort of a pattern or a grain, that topography actually can become beautiful. It's one of those sort of last realms that hasn't been designed, by a car designer. So I think, maybe that won't translate directly into a production car, but the design philosophy definitely has to be the approach going into a production.
And I think if I can add to Martin and in your question specifically, I think the dimensions of the car are this, 4.2, between 4.2 and 4.3 meters. So there's no show car sort of liberty in what the architecture actually represents, the alpha. So in terms of dimensions, proportion, volumes, this is very, very much a real car that we can deliver.
Yeah.
Yes, there are details, like the single hinge on the sliding door, etc. That we'll look at. Seating configurations, we have actually a package bus that seats 7 people, even in this 4.2 meter length. That speaks volumes about the packaging team actually, in engineering. Now we can choose to do a 3-row, we can choose to do a 2-row. That choice, I think, we have that flexibility. But this is the overall, dimension of the car. Should we go ahead and bring it into a production program?
Yeah, it was very much designed like as a production program, in the sense like Pratap says, it is on an existing platform. It is within, a package. It is realistic. The wheel size is I wouldn't say like concept car level.
No.
So overall, it has an objective, which is not only, you know, to create a show car and a nice dialogue, you know, for designers and fans of the original Sierra, but actually to create a viable proposal into the portfolio.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we're just about at the end here, so maybe I'll just ask you each to leave us with maybe just a couple of words, and in 10 words, what are you looking to take from this vehicle forward most in terms of the design language and themes which are coming out? You've heard a great explanation of what we might expect from production side, but just maybe close us out with that. I'll ask you to start, Tata.
Yeah, so for me, it's really the strength without aggression. I think it's very, very important for us as a group. But this car really shows that you can have a strong design without being aggressive. So strength without aggression is my takeaway from here.
And for me, it's just like good design, whatever the product that you're working on, good design is always the right solution. You know, it's not just an aesthetic solution, but it's actually, you know, what is the product, you know, proposition.
Yeah.
Thanks to both of you, and thank you so much to your team for all of this insight and this story, which is really fascinating. We're really excited to track the progress and, of course, keep up with you about the new products coming in the future as well. Martin, Pratap, thanks so much for joining us at Car Design Dialogues Europe.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you to our audience for your great comments and questions. Stick around. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes. We've got a great panel coming up, looking beyond design, talking about other influences of industries on automotive design. We look forward to it. Thanks again.